The lost one. The alarms screamed through the freighter Odyssey's end like wounded animals. Bulkheads groaned under the pressure of fire chewing through the outer decks, and every corridor seemed to tilt at impossible angles. Elena Torres clung to a scorched support beam, coughing black smoke out of her lungs. The emergency lighting strobed red, painting everything in violent pulses. She could barely hear her own ragged breathing over the claxons. Somewhere above, the hull cracked with the thunder of weapons fire. The battle outside was lost, the human colony fleet shattered by an enemy no one had been ready for. Elena wasn't a soldier. She was an engineer, a fixer of power couplings and hull plating, not a fighter. But survival didn't care about job titles. She staggered forward, boots slipping on melted alloy, searching for a working escape pod. Most were gone. Blown to shreds or already jettisoned. Her wrist comm buzzed with static. All units, fall back to rally point. The message cut into noise. Elena slammed her fist against it, but she knew the truth. The fleet was gone. She was alone. The ship lurched violently. A hull breach. For a moment she saw the stars directly, cruel and brilliant, before the emergency shutters sealed. Her oxygen mask hissed, trying to keep her conscious. Her strength faltered. Maybe this was it. Then, another sound. Not human. Boots echoed in the smoke, heavier, sharper. Shapes emerged, scaled figures with elongated jaws and slit-pupiled eyes. Tharkai. Salvagers, scavengers, opportunists. Humanity didn't trust them, and for good reason. Where others saw tragedy, the Tharkai saw salvage. Elena tried to crawl backward, but her limbs felt like lead. She knew what would come next. They would strip the freighter for parts, and her corpse would be another piece of forgotten debris. The tallest one hissed a command in their guttural tongue. Two others moved closer, their armor gleaming green in the emergency light. One crouched over her. His slitted eyes narrowed, studying her face. "Human," he growled, the word rough but understandable. Elena coughed, forcing the words out. "Leave me. Take what you want." For a heartbeat, there was silence. Then the crouching Tharkai glanced back at his leader. They exchanged a rapid, tense conversation. She couldn't follow it, but she knew that tone, disagreement. The leader barked something final, but the crouching one, young, by his voice, snarled back, defiance burning in every syllable. He turned to Elena again, pressing a clawed hand against her mask to stabilize it. "Not salvage," he muttered. "Life." Her vision blurred. She barely understood. Strong hands lifted her, cradling her against cold armor. As consciousness slipped, the last thing she heard was the hiss of the leader's protest, and the younger one's unyielding reply. When she woke again, there was no smoke. No fire. Just the low hum of engines and the antiseptic tang of med gel on her skin. Elena blinked, staring at a curved ceiling painted in alien script. The air was cool, breathable. She sat up slowly, wincing at the ache in her ribs. A figure stood nearby, the young Tharkai. His scales shimmered a dusky bronze under the lights. He wore no helmet now, only a faint expression she couldn't read. "You live," he said. Elena swallowed. "Why?" He tilted his head, as though the question puzzled him. "Because we could. That's simple. No expectation, no condition. Just a statement of fact." But Elena knew what it had cost. Oxygen, med-gel, energy, resources the Tharkai rarely wasted. They weren't wealthy. They weren't altruists. And yet, when every instinct of survival should have told them to abandon her, they had carried her away from the fire. Her father's voice returned, memory sharp despite the haze. "If someone gives you a hand in the dark, you never forget it, Elena. One day, you'll return it." The young Tharkai, she thought his name sounded like Krex, watched her with unblinking eyes. He didn't ask for thanks. He didn't need to. Outside, she could feel the ship moving, pulling away from the wreck of the battle. The stars belonged to the victors now, but she had survived because one alien had chosen differently. And deep in her chest, she made a silent vow. They had saved one human. One insignificant engineer, forgotten by her own fleet. But humanity did not forget debts. Someday, somehow, they would return, for all of them. A debt of honor. The Tharkai homeworld was nothing like the glittering metropolises of the human core. From orbit, it appeared scarred, mountain ranges carved by ancient strip mines, oceans dulled by centuries of neglect. Great cities sprawled across the surface, but they were a patchwork of shining towers and crumbling ruins, wealth and poverty pressed side by side like scars over healing flesh. Elena stood at the viewport of their transport, heart hammering. She had never imagined she would set foot on an alien world, least of all this one. For humans, the Tharkai were a whispered warning, traitors without loyalty, scavengers who circled battlefields like carrion birds. Yet they had saved her, and now she was in their hands. They called him Krex. The young Tharkai who had carried her from the freighter rarely left her side. His presence was both reassuring and unsettling, tall, armored, his reptilian features unreadable. When he spoke, his words were clipped, rough with the edges of a language not his own. "You will walk today," he said on her third sunrise aboard their ship. "Strength returns faster when used." Elena had no choice but to trust him. Her ribs still ached, her muscles weak, but she followed him through the ship's corridors until they reached the hangar bay. A shuttle waited. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Home," Krex said simply. The capital city was alive in ways she hadn't expected. Merchants shouted in open-air markets, children darted between narrow alleys, and the scent of spiced meat drifted through the air. But beneath it all was tension. She could feel the eyes on her, the human among predators. Some stared in open curiosity, others with thinly veiled contempt. Krex led her to his clan's dwelling, a tall spire of stone and steel rising from the crowded streets. Inside, the walls were adorned with banners marked by clawed sigils. It smelled of smoke and oil, the air heavy with heat. The clan leader, an elder named Varric, greeted her with little warmth. His scales were pale with age, his eyes sharp. "You should not be here," Varric said in their common tongue, voice like gravel. "Your kind brings only entanglements. Krex defied my order when he saved you." Elena stiffened, but Krex stepped forward, defiant. "She is life. Our code demands it." Varric's eyes narrowed. "The code does not fill empty bellies. It does not shield us from enemies who see mercy as weakness." Their argument was cut short as Elena raised her hand. "I didn't ask to be saved. But you did save me. And that matters. Where I come from, we don't forget debts like that." Varric regarded her in silence for a long moment before turning away. "We shall see if your words mean anything, human." Days passed. Elena learned more of the Tharkai than she had ever thought possible. They were not the ruthless scavengers human propaganda painted them to be. They were fractured, yes, clans divided by pride and poverty, but they were also bound by traditions older than some human nations. The Code of Preservation, Krex explained one night by the fire, was one such tradition. It declared that no life that could be saved should be abandoned, no matter the cost. Few clans still honored it. His did. "It is why I carried you," Krex said, his voice softer than usual. "Not because you are human. Because you are life." Elena listened, a weight settling in her chest. How strange, that those branded as opportunists clung to a code more noble than many in her own species. But she also saw the price. Krex's clan faced ridicule from others for wasting resources on her. She heard the whispers in the markets, that the humans were ungrateful, that the Tharkai had risked themselves for nothing. She could not argue against their fear. She was one human, fragile and far from home. But her father's words echoed again, clear and insistent. "You never forget. One day, you return it." The day she left, Krex stood with her at the shuttle pad. The human fleet had finally responded to her beacon, and a small vessel was inbound to retrieve her. "You will return to your kind now," Krex said. His tone was neutral, but his eyes flickered with something else, regret, perhaps. Elena hesitated. "And you'll stay here, taking the heat for saving me?" He gave a small, reptilian shrug. "It was the right thing." She stepped closer, meeting his unblinking gaze. "Then hear this. Humanity doesn't forget. You saved one of us. Someday, we'll return for all of you." The engines roared to life. As the shuttle lifted her toward the stars, Elena carried with her not just survival, but a vow, one that would shape the future of two peoples. The return. The Tharkai sky burned. Columns of smoke rose from shattered cities, their spires crumbling under the relentless bombardment of the Varn Dominion. The invaders moved like a storm front, dark and methodical, pressing the Tharkai into submission. Entire districts were leveled in hours. Refugees crowded the roads, fleeing from fire that never stopped falling. Krex stood among the defenders on the broken walls of Kareth Prime, rifle in hand, scales dusted with ash. His armor was cracked, his breath ragged. They had fought for weeks with dwindling supplies, their pleas for aid scattering into silence. The other empires had written the Tharkai off as scavengers unworthy of saving. Now only ruin remained. When the next wave of Dominion warships appeared in the sky, Krex braced himself. This was the end. His people would be chained or exterminated, and no one would remember they had ever existed. Then the sky tore open. Not with fire, but with light. Dozens of new ships blinked into orbit, their hulls marked by a familiar emblem, a blue and white crest of Earth and its colonies. Human ships. Krex's breath caught. For a moment he thought he was hallucinating. But no, the comms lit up, carrying a voice across every channel. This is Commander Elena Torres of the United Human Fleet. Her voice was steady, fierce. Tharkai, you saved one of us. Now we return for all of you. The words struck like thunder. The defenders around Krex shouted in disbelief. Some dropped to their knees. Others roared with renewed fury. And then the battle began. The Dominion ships turned to meet the new arrivals, unleashing a storm of plasma fire. But the humans came in fast, weaving through the barrage with tactics no one had ever seen. Reckless dives, sudden feints, swarms of fighters darting between capital ships like hornets. Where Tharkai fought with discipline and caution, humanity fought with raw audacity. Krex watched from the ground as one human destroyer plowed through the middle of the Dominion formation, its guns blazing even as its hull burned. The sight was madness. It was also hope. On the comms, Elena's voice returned, this time directed to the defenders. Tharkai soldiers, rally. Strike with us. Take back your home. Krex gripped his rifle and roared. His squad surged forward, hearts ignited by a fire they had thought extinguished. Together, Tharkai and human forces struck the Dominion in a pincer. For every block the enemy took, the defenders clawed back too. The Dominion had expected easy prey. Instead, they found prey with fangs, and allies who refused to abandon them. Hours stretched into a blur of fire and steel. Krex fought side by side with human marines, their strange helmets and blunt weapons contrasting with his people's sleek rifles. The humans bled freely, fought savagely, and never once retreated when a Tharkai line faltered. He saw one human soldier throw himself over a wounded Tharkai child as a plasma bolt tore through the street. He saw another lift a fallen Tharkai warrior to her feet, shouting encouragement in a language the warrior barely understood. These were not debts of calculation. These were acts of kinship. By dawn, the Dominion fleet broke. Their ships reeled under the combined assault, and their ground forces, cut off from support, began to retreat. The sky cleared, revealing sunlight where fire had been. Krex stood among the rubble, chest heaving, eyes fixed upward. The human flagship hovered above the city like a guardian. A shuttle descended, sleek and scarred from battle. Its hatch opened, and there she was, Elena Torres, clad in a commander's uniform, a scar running along her cheek but her gaze burning with the same defiance he remembered. Krex stepped forward, too stunned to speak. She broke the silence first. Told you, Krex. We don't forget. For the first time in weeks, Krex allowed himself to believe in tomorrow. The new bond. The smoke had finally begun to lift. For the first time in months, sunlight reached the streets of Kareth Prime without being filtered through ash and fire. The people moved cautiously among the ruins, their scales glinting in the light. Where once there had been silence broken only by mourning, now there were hammers striking stone, voices calling to one another, and laughter, tentative but real. The Dominion had been driven back. Humanity had come when no one else would. Krex walked slowly through the broken avenues, his rifle slung across his back. Everywhere he turned, he saw the impossible, humans and Tharkai working side by side. A human medic knelt over an injured hatchling, soothing it in broken Tharkai phrases. A squad of marines hauled stone to reinforce a crumbling tower. Children from both species played in the rubble, inventing games with sticks and broken helmets, as though the war had been nothing more than a storm to wait out. And at the center of it all stood Elena Torres. She wore the uniform of a commander now, though it was soot-stained and torn. Her hair was tied back, her expression both tired and determined. She was no longer the frightened engineer Krex had carried from a burning freighter. She was the voice that had called an entire fleet across the stars. When she spotted him, her face lit up with recognition. Krex. He inclined his head, unsure how to voice what churned in his chest. She approached, her step steady despite the uneven ground. "You look different," she said. "As do you," Krex replied. He gestured toward the humans working alongside his kin. "Why? Why risk so much for us? The Dominion is a terror even for you." Elena's gaze was steady. "Because you saved me. And when you saved me, you proved something, that mercy exists even where no one expects it. My people don't forget debts like that. Not ever." Krex was silent, the weight of her words sinking deep. For his clan, the code of preservation had always felt like a relic, a burden in a galaxy where survival demanded selfishness. Yet here stood proof that one act of compassion had sparked an alliance strong enough to turn back an empire. Later that evening, survivors gathered in the ruins of the Grand Assembly Hall. The roof was half collapsed, but its foundation held, and torches burned where lights had once glowed. Tharkai elders, soldiers, and civilians pressed shoulder to shoulder with human marines and officers. Elena stepped onto the fractured dais, the crowd quieting around her. Krex watched from the front, his chest tight. She spoke without notes, her voice carrying over the rubble and the silence. "You fought when no one came to your aid. You endured when the galaxy abandoned you. And when you could have turned inward, when you could have let cruelty define you, you chose mercy. You saved me. One life, insignificant in the scope of war. And because you did, my people remembered." Her gaze swept across the crowd, locking with Tharkai and human alike. "We are different, our bodies, our worlds, our ways of speaking. But in this, we are the same. We do not abandon those who stand with us. Today, you are not alone. Tomorrow, you never will be again." For a moment, there was silence. Then Krex raised his fist to the sky and roared, a sound echoed by every Tharkai voice in the hall. The humans followed, their cheers rough and loud, until the ruins trembled with the sound of unity. As the gathering dispersed, Krex found himself standing beside Elena once more. The fires of the torches flickered across her face. "You have changed my people," he said quietly. She shook her head. "No. You changed them when you carried me from that wreck. I just returned the favor." They stood in silence, listening to the mingling voices of their people. A human child darted past, laughing, chased by a Tharkai hatchling. Their joy rang through the air like a promise. Krex looked upward, where the stars burned bright and unclouded at last. For the first time in his life, they did not seem so cold, so distant. "Perhaps," he murmured, "this is only the beginning." Elena's smile was small but sure. "It is." And as dawn crept over the horizon, the ruins of Kareth Prime no longer felt like the end of a story, but the first page of a new one, written not in blood or conquest, but in the bond between two peoples who had learned the same truth. That mercy, once given, is never forgotten.